He's just a janitor. But when the CEO followed him that night, she had no idea she was about to step into a story that would change the company and her own life. Alexis Monroe stared at the surveillance screen, the wall clock ticking relentlessly. In the bottom right corner of the frame, Daniel Wright, the night shift janitor, was leaning over the workstation of the chief technical officer. He didn't take anything. He just typed a few lines on the keyboard, then pulled out a small storage device and slipped it into his jacket pocket. No rush, no panic, calm, as if it were just part of his job. A chill ran down Alexis's spine. This wasn't the first time. She had rewound and reviewed hours of footage. Daniel kept showing up in places he wasn't assigned to be. The server room, the R&D hallway, even the conference room where High-On Systems' most sensitive data was shared behind closed doors. A tech spy, a breach in the security system, or something she hadn't figured out yet. Alexis didn't like unanswered questions. She didn't earn the CEO seat at 36 by chance, but by sharp instincts and the ability to make fast calls in complex situations. The product launch was just weeks away. If Daniel Wright was a threat, she needed to know. And if he wasn't, she needed to know that too. That night, she left her designer blazer in the office, swapped it for a thin gray sweater and jeans, her hair tied low, no makeup. Only her eyes remained alert, the kind that had sat through years of meetings where no mistake was allowed. Daniel clocked out, and no one said goodbye as he walked out of the building and got into an old paint-chipped Honda parked by the wall. Alexis followed at a distance, 3 cars behind, no headlights. From Beacon Hill to Dorchester, the glitz of downtown Boston faded into dull streetlights in aging brick buildings. The car stopped in front of a rundown community center. The sign was so faded it was barely readable. Harbor Light Community Center. Daniel pulled a heavy backpack from the trunk and stepped inside. Alexis stayed in the car. Her hands gripped the steering wheel. She didn't know that behind that door wasn't a threat. It was a blueprint for the rest of her life, starting with the man she once thought was just a name at the bottom of the payroll list. The glass doors of Harbor Light Community Center were fogged over, reflecting the soft, drifting glow of the streetlights on its peeling paint. Alexis turned off the engine and sat still in the dark. Through the small window, she watched as Daniel switched on the lights. No security, no cameras, just a small room with old chairs and tables, a whiteboard leaning slightly to one side. He carefully arranged each laptop, untangling cords, checking batteries, wiping screens like they were something precious. Minutes later, the kids started arriving, all ages, races, sizes. Some wore coats far too big, and some had backpacks with broken straps. No one was loud. No one was turned away. Daniel greeted each one by name, pointed them to a seat, and placed a gentle hand on the shoulder of a child who was shivering from the cold. Alexis stayed behind the glass, her heartbeat slowing. Daniel stood in front of the whiteboard, marker in hand. Remember what we learned about optimization algorithms? His voice was warm, steady, no longer the quiet echo of a janitor in an empty hallway. Tonight, we're going to use that to build a tool that helps the community. He sketched a diagram, talked about loops, variables, and data. The kids listened like they were absorbing every word. Their eyes lit up. Fingers moved over keyboards. No one checked their phones. No one left their seat. Not for grades, not for rewards, but because someone believed they were good enough to learn this. A curly-haired girl sitting in the front raised her hand. "Sir, could we use this structure to fix the center's database too?" Daniel nodded. "Exactly, Lucia. That's the real-world application I had in mind." Alexis held her breath. Lines of code filled the screen, not beginner stuff. It was complex system architecture, enough to challenge a college student, and yet they were doing it because of him. After class, Daniel led a small group into the next room. On the table, 5 old laptops sat neatly in a row. "These are yours. They already have the learning and coding programs installed. Password is your birthday, just like I showed you." A boy, no older than 10, clutched the laptop like a treasure. His eyes were red, but he said nothing. Alexis swallowed hard. In her mind, the surveillance footage, the moments Daniel touched company computers, those quiet glances, it all replayed like a film edited in the wrong order. Not a spy, not a data thief, a man trying to patch the world with scraps of technology everyone else had thrown away. She lifted her hand to the car door, ready to open it, but stopped, partly afraid to break the moment, partly because a question had just echoed inside her. Had I ever really seen this man before? The next morning, Alexis Monroe arrived at the office earlier than usual. The coffee on her desk had gone cold. Her eyes were fixed on the screen, where one name stood clearly: Daniel Wright, Jonathan Daniel Wright, Senior Systems Architect, Vanguard Logic. One click opened an old file buried deep in the tech industry's internal network archives. She wasn't mistaken. It was him. The man who mopped the ninth floor every night was once one of the architects behind the very framework Hion was now using as the core of its product. A blurry 2015 article showed him speaking at a software development conference in Chicago. That posture, those eyes, they were exactly the same as the man she'd just seen through the glass at Harbor Light. But the record ended abruptly. No more articles, no new companies, no promotions. Just gone. Alexis frowned and typed a few deeper queries into the industry database. A civil lawsuit appeared. Case Daniel Wright versus William Harrington, CEO of Vanguard Logic, for unlawful termination related to whistleblowing on errors in a medical software system. She read every line slowly. Daniel had discovered that the optimization algorithm in their diagnostic tool could lead to inaccurate results in critical illness cases. He raised the concern. No one fixed it, so he reported it externally. A month later, he was fired. Alexis paused when she reached the final section. The lawsuit had been quietly settled with a small payout, no admission of wrongdoing. Immediately after, almost as a footnote, one line read, "Wife deceased, late-stage cancer, one young daughter, no other known family, no further employment in the industry." She placed her hand on the desk, silent for a long time. Behind all the glass walls and market share reports, stories like his had disappeared, and no one asked why. She thought back to the night before, the boy clutching the laptop, the kids learning to code on refurbished machines, Daniel's steady voice explaining algorithms. Not for profit, not for KPIs, but because they needed to know, and he believed they could learn. No more doubt, no more second guessing. The man she once thought was a threat had helped build the very foundation she was now leading and had lost everything because of something few people still held on to: technical conscience. In a world that had grown used to overlooking the quiet ones, he had chosen silence to keep doing what was right in his own way. Alexis sat quietly in front of the screen. She didn't make a decision. She didn't call security. She didn't send an email. She just sat there, for the first time truly seeing a person. Not through a file, not through a camera, but through what he had lost and everything he was still quietly giving. Late that afternoon, Alexis returned to Harbor Light, not through the gauze, not hidden in her car. She pushed open the wooden door, which creaked softly, and walked straight inside. The air smelled of old books, warm plastic, and the faint comfort of children's voices echoing through narrow hallways. An older woman with neatly tied silver hair was shelving books. She looked up as Alexis entered, eyes sharp like someone who'd spent years quietly observing. "Good afternoon," she said unhurried. "I'm Linda Chavez, the center director. Can I help you with something?" Alexis reached out her hand gently. "I'm Alexis Monroe, CEO of Hion Systems. I recently learned about the work Daniel Wright does here. I'd like to understand more, if that's okay." Linda tilted her head slightly, her gaze part curiosity, part caution. "Daniel never mentioned he knew anyone at Hion." "We don't really know each other," Alexis replied slowly. "I just want to understand the impact he's had here." Linda led her down the hallway. They passed a classroom where a few kids were piecing together computer parts and another where a group of teens were learning how to design websites for local shops. Lucia waved. A young boy hugged his laptop like a treasure, eyes lighting up as his keyboard glowed. "Before Daniel came," Linda said, "we had a handful of outdated machines. Getting Word to run was a win. Most of the kids had never seen a command line. Some didn't even know how to turn on a computer." Alexis looked around. The room was still worn, paint peeling from the walls, broken chairs tied back together with rope. But the kids sat up straight, focused, confident. Daniel doesn't just teach, Linda went on. He fixes machines, recycles broken equipment, installs learning software, and wrote the whole curriculum himself. He comes every night after his shift. No paycheck, no recognition. Alexis swallowed quietly. Linda's voice softened as they paused outside a small room where Daniel was patiently showing an elderly woman how to make a video call. She hadn't spoken to her grandchild in Venezuela for 8 years. Daniel made that connection happen. Now they talk every week. Alexis watched him through the doorway. He was smiling, one hand gently guiding the mouse, walking her through the steps. No rush, no judgment, no need for credit. "We have over 60 kids on the waiting list," Linda said softly. "We're short on everything, space, equipment, stable internet. But Daniel, he works magic with almost nothing." Alexis tightened her grip on her bag. A voice in her head spoke, clearer than any strategic report she'd ever written. "If someone like him can be overlooked, then we're building the whole system wrong." And maybe she had misjudged him once. But now she chose not to look away again. Days before the product launch, the 13th floor of Hyene Systems buzzed with tension and frantic typing. A red alert lit up on the central dashboard. A critical system error had just been discovered in the integration layer, one that could crash the entire platform once it scaled to real-world user volume. An emergency meeting was called. The conference room was packed. Everyone was talking. No one was listening. Solutions were thrown out one after another. Too risky, too slow, months to implement. Alexis Monroe sat quietly, clutching a folder, eyes fixed on the hallway where a familiar figure was silently wiping down the glass wall outside. Daniel Wright. He never looked into the room, but through the reflection in the glass, Alexis saw his eyes, focused, calm, as if reading the language of crisis. She stood up, opened the door. "Daniel," her voice was soft but steady. "I need you." He turned, still holding the cloth. "What can I do?" "There's a flaw in the framework," she said plainly. "Something tied to the old Vanguard logic system. Can you take a look?" Daniel was quiet for a single breath, then nodded. "If you'll allow me." In Alexis's private office, the screen showed an endless stream of error code. Daniel sat down. His hands hovered briefly over the keyboard. Then he began to type. Within minutes, the energy in the room shifted. His posture moved from cautious to assured. His eyes sharpened. The lines of code unfolded like a map he'd once drawn from memory. "It's not in the integration layer," he said, voice steady. "The issue is in the original memory allocation module. Once user traffic exceeds a threshold, it leaks, bringing down the entire application stack." Alexis didn't ask how he knew. She already knew. "Can you fix it if I give you full access to the source code and a team that listens?" She nodded. "Come with me." As they entered the meeting room, the technical leads fell silent. They stared at the janitor standing next to the CEO, uncertain. "This is Daniel Wright," Alexis said clearly. "He was the lead systems architect at Vanguard Logic, and he just identified the root cause of the error you've been debating for hours. For the next 48 hours, she continued, he'll be working directly with the development team. I suggest you listen." Days later, the product launched on schedule, not just stable, but faster, lighter. The code Daniel proposed didn't just fix the problem. It streamlined the system so thoroughly, the tech team called it a silent transformation. Hyene stock jumped 12% on the first day of trading. Daniel returned to his cart and mop, but this time no one walked past him without turning back. On Monday morning, every employee at Hyene Systems was invited to the main atrium, from strategy directors to logistics staff, from software engineers to the night shift cleaning crew. The glass hall gleamed under the early autumn sunlight. On the raised platform, Alexis Monroe stood at the microphone, her expression composed but softened by a kind of sincerity rarely seen in a CEO. "Today," she began, her voice steady, "we're not just celebrating a successful product launch. We're celebrating something more important than any number." Truth. She paused, her eyes drifting to the back row where Daniel Wright stood, still holding a cleaning cloth, the faded blue of his uniform clinging to his thin frame. Many of us know Daniel as the one who keeps this building clean every night. But few know that before this job, he was the lead systems architect at Vanguard Logic, the very person who helped lay the foundation for the technology Hyene is built on. room fell completely silent. All eyes turned to the man who hadn't yet let go of his tools. Daniel once faced a choice few of us had ever have to, Alexis continued. He spoke up about violations that could have harmed real people. He was fired, shut out of the industry, and while we walked past him every day, he quietly kept doing the right thing. She stepped down from the stage and approached him. On behalf of the company, I'm sorry we didn't see you sooner, and I'd like to invite you back to the role you deserve, head of engineering. A stillness followed. Daniel blinked, then stepped forward just enough for everyone to hear him clearly. That's a generous offer, he said slowly. I'm grateful, but I have to decline. The quiet murmurs in the room faded away. Yes, I lost a career, he said, but in doing so I found something else, meaning at Harbor Light. I see kids who never dreamed of touching a keyboard now building apps for their communities. I can't walk away from them. His voice wasn't loud, but it was steady, a quiet kind of confidence that didn't need to be performed. Alexis nodded, not disappointed but understanding. She turned back to the room. Then we'll do something different, she said. Hion will launch a community tech initiative with Harbor Light as our lead partner, and if Daniel agrees, he will lead it this time. The entire atrium erupted in applause. Daniel looked at her, and in his eyes that had stayed cautious for years, something new began to shine. I accept, he said, but only if the goal isn't prestige, but the kids still waiting for a chance outside these glass walls. Alexis smiled. Then let's begin again, where we should have started all along. A week after the all-company meeting, a new sign was hung outside the center. Harbor Technology and Community Initiative in partnership with Hion Systems. White letters on dark wood, simple but solid, just like the man behind it. Daniel Wright was officially named Director of the Community Technology Initiative, a title that sounded big, but to him, it simply meant continuing what he'd always done, teaching. Only now he had real resources, a proper classroom, stable Wi-Fi, and enough equipment for every student. A team of young engineers from Hion volunteered once a week. As for Alexis Monroe, still the CEO, her visits to Harbor Light weren't just for checking project progress anymore. At first, she came with a clipboard and a tight schedule, her questions circling around budgets, outcomes, and expansion plans. But then she started leaving the clipboard on the chair and sitting down on the floor next to the kids learning to wire basic circuits, laughing when a boy mixed up the power pins, nodding when a little girl correctly explained a binary search algorithm. Daniel noticed the change. He didn't say anything, just quietly pulled out another chair when she arrived early, made extra tea when she looked tired, and gave her space when she just wanted to sit in silence and watch the class run without interference. One evening, Alexis walked in to find her son, Noah, sitting beside Ava, Daniel's daughter. The two of them were locked in a debate over a chunk of code that wouldn't run. Daniel stood behind them, smiling, letting them work it out. Alexis stepped beside him, also saying nothing. My son's never really cared for anything I do, she said softly. Maybe because Hion products don't have dinosaurs or spaceships, Daniel replied with a quiet smile. She laughed, really laughed, for the first time in that space. Not because of the agenda, not because of success metrics, but simply because it was fun. The program grew quickly. Former students returned as teaching assistants. One earned a full scholarship in tech. Another landed a summer internship at Hun. Each small victory was pinned to the center's bulletin board, like little flags marking a shared journey. And in the midst of it all, Alexis realized something simple but profound. She hadn't come here just to build a program. She came to touch something she'd long forgotten on her climb to the top. Life, truth, and one man without a title who could change an entire world just by showing up with patience and hands that knew exactly where to place their care. Noah and Ava quickly became inseparable in class. They sat side by side, coding together, giggling when a line of code failed, but produced something hilariously unexpected. Outside class, they competed to see who could wire a circuit faster, whose robot could travel farther. Neither gave in easily, but when it mattered, both knew when to reach out first. For the first time, Alexis saw her son willingly stay behind after class, showing his friend how to fix a programming logic error. Not for a grade, but because he wanted to stay just a little longer. be a little closer to Ava. She too began staying a little longer after lessons. Daniel often invited the two of them to stay for a simple dinner with him and Ava. No white tablecloths, no flickering candles like the charity galas Alexis used to attend, just pasta cooked just right, crispy toast, and an old wooden table big enough for four. In the small kitchen, Ava and Noah argued over who got to wash the dishes. Alexis sliced fruit, Daniel brewed tea. Everything felt still for the first time in years. She realized what it meant to sit next to someone without needing to say much, without having to hold up an image. Daniel didn't ask her about next quarter's strategy. She didn't ask him about old wounds. But between them was a quiet kind of understanding that words couldn't quite reach. One evening, as Noah and Ava ran off to the garden behind the center, Alexis and Daniel sat together on the wooden steps. The sunset fell softly across the tiled roofs and the dry trees whispering in the wind. There was a time, Daniel said quietly, I thought I'd never feel this again. Family, laughter, a full dinner table. She stayed silent, then answered, I thought I'd never trust anyone enough to sit still without checking the time. He looked at her, not rushing, not reading her, just looked, like he was seeing her for the first time. Not the CEO, not the person who signed off on budgets, but a mother learning how to sit still again in a world she thought had broken. From evening lessons came shared dinners. From dinners came late nights cleaning up, school trips together, quiet moments watching their kids grow into each other, bit by bit. And somewhere between the clinking of dishes, a question about binary division, and a glance held just long enough, something began to take root. It didn't need a name, it just needed to stay. The December board meeting was held in the glass-walled room on the 25th floor, where Boston drifted in the distance beyond the cold window panes. On the table were quarterly reports, profit charts, and a line of red ink notes. Reevaluate budget for Harbor Light Community Initiative. Alexis Monroe sat still as the first question came from an older shareholder, his voice low and steady. Are we investing too heavily in a program with no clear return? A CFO followed up. The immediate impact isn't measurable. Equipment, staffing, engineer hours. It's all pulling resources away from our core product. Alexis folded her hands in front of her, still gazing out the glass, then turned back. I understand your concerns, she began, her voice low but firm. We work in a world that measures everything in numbers, but some values don't show up in spreadsheets, at least not right away. She pressed a button. The large screen behind her lit up with images. Ava and Noah beaming in front of a classroom, a group of students presenting an app designed for the elderly, a boy who once didn't know how to power on a computer, now interning at Hion as a software tester. Harbor Light isn't just charity, Alexis continued. It's an investment in overlooked talent, the kind the current system routinely leaves behind. A board member cut in. But the cost! Daniel Wright once wrote the framework Hion is built on, she said, eyes locked on him. And because we didn't see him, he ended up mopping the floors of the very building running his code. We cannot let that happen again. If we don't make it a point to look, to open the door, we'll keep losing the people who should have been with us from the start. She paused, then added, quieter but unwavering, I'm not just defending Daniel Wright. I'm defending a vision for a different Hion, a company that sees value before the world catches on. And if anyone still has doubts, look at the spike in brand recognition, the surge in community applications, and the 17 students we've now brought into our internship program. She sat down. There was nothing more to say. Silence held for a few seconds, then a few nods, and a final word from the board chair. Proceed, but keep it closely reported. This clearly qualifies as an investment worth watching. After the meeting, Daniel was waiting in the hallway. He didn't need to ask anything. He simply said quietly, You don't have to fight for me. She answered without looking at him, eyes fixed on the skyline turning gold in the setting sun. No, I'm fighting for everyone who's never been allowed inside that room. One spring afternoon, sunlight gently fell across the new tiled roof of Harbor Light. Strips of colorful paper flags fluttered in the breeze. Children laughed. Adults gathered around the small courtyard, holding paper cups of coffee, their eyes carrying a quiet kind of pride. A freshly painted wooden sign hung above the new classroom, Wright Technology Lab. engraved cleanly, simply, like the man the room was named to honor. Daniel stood at the very back, his pale blue shirt neatly pressed, rarely worn. But today was different. Ava held his hand, her eyes fixed on the 3D printer working inside, a project her class had planned and assembled themselves. At the front, Alexis stepped up to the microphone. The wind played through her hair, but her gaze stayed steady. When we started this initiative, she said, people ask me why. Why would a CEO, why would a tech company invest resources into an old community center on the edge of the city? I didn't answer right away because sometimes it takes time to see what really matters. She looked toward the back of the courtyard where Daniel stood quietly in the crowd, as always. Today, the answer is in those eyes lighting up inside that classroom, in the hands that once hesitated, now typing each line of code without fear, and in the people who were once seen as outsiders, now building the very foundation of the future. Applause followed, not loud or dramatic, just enough like a quiet, collective yes. After the ceremony, Alexa stepped down and made her way through the crowd to find Daniel. She spotted him helping Noah adjust a temperature sensor. Ava was beside them, guiding the younger kids on how to connect wires so they wouldn't come loose. All good? She asked softly as Daniel turned to her. He nodded. They're already doing better than we did at their age. She laughed, not the laugh of a triumphant executive, but a soft exhale from someone who had finally found where they belonged. They walked together out into the yard where fresh grass was sprouting after the renovations. Noah and Ava were playing a relay race with new friends. Their laughter rang out like a string pulled exactly to the right note. Daniel gently took Alexis's hand. He didn't ask. He didn't need to. She held his hand back, no longer CEO and employee, no longer executive and someone the industry had once pushed aside. Just two people who had once lost their way, now quietly redefining what it meant to lead. The old building now had a new look. But what truly changed wasn't the bricks or the upgraded equipment. It was the people. It was how a child was called by name, the right way. It was a hand extended not for business cards but in belief. This story doesn't end here because some architectures, like some people, need time to reveal the full beauty of what they're made of. And at Harbor Light, that journey has only just begun. What does it mean to truly see someone, not just their title or role, but the depth of their impact and resilience? In the story of Daniel Wright, a janitor overlooked by a bustling tech company, we witness a powerful lesson. True value lies in the unseen acts of kindness and purpose that shape lives. Daniel, once a brilliant systems architect, was cast aside after whistleblowing on a flawed medical tool, losing his career and wife. Yet he poured his expertise into teaching children at Harbor Light Community Center. His quiet dedication, refurbishing laptops, crafting curriculums, empowering kids to dream, reveals that worth isn't measured by status, but by the lives we touch. Alexis Monroe, the CEO who initially suspected him, learned this when she followed him, expecting deceit but finding inspiration. Her transformation from skepticism to advocacy shows that recognizing someone's truth can reshape not just their path, but our own. This story stirs a deep ache for those dismissed, yet it sparks hope that one moment of seeing can change everything. It challenges us. Who have we overlooked, and how might their hidden brilliance light up our world if we pause to notice? If this story moved you, share in the comments a time when someone's unseen kindness changed your perspective. Let's celebrate those quiet heroes. And if you believe in stories of second chances and human connection, hit that like button and subscribe to join us for more tales that remind us to look deeper. Your support fuels these journeys, so stay with us and let's keep believing in the power of truly seeing one another.